What a rotten place! The thought struck Petrov, the stronghold's emissary, the moment he stepped from his cabin. The smell of damp, decaying wood assaulted his senses. The air, heavy and oppressive, clung to him. He lifted his head and inhaled slowly. Above, a blanket of grey clouds threatened rain. His assistant placed a wool coat over his shoulders. "The last time you were here was a year ago," the assistant said. "There's nothing here but stone." Petrov corrected him. "A year and a half ago. The Duke sends someone different each season. It was summer the last time I was in Border Town, and they have more than just ore. They have fine furs and—" "What?" His assistant's face was blank. Petrov shook his head without answering. He crossed the gangplank and stepped onto the pier. Moss made the wood slick, and a plank groaned loudly under his foot. The dock would hold for another few years, he thought, but it would surely collapse after that. Border Town didn't just have stone and fur, it had land. But there was no point in saying so. The assistant was a minor city hall official. He was incapable of seeing the bigger picture. Between Longsong, Stronghold, and Border Town lay a vast expanse of untamed wilderness. On one side, the impassable mountain range rose like a wall. On the other, the Kishui River created a long, narrow corridor. Border Town was an outpost. If it could be secured, all that land would fall into the stronghold's possession. It was virgin soil, not yet cultivated, so it wouldn't need to lie fallow before planting. One could plant several crop cycles, and with natural defenses on both sides, producing enough food for the entire stronghold would be a simple matter. The so-called food shortage was merely a pretext to offload the stronghold's surplus population. In time, Border Town and the stronghold were destined to become a single territory, not the separate domains they were now. The only drawback was the cost, a 3 to 5-year operation requiring large sums of money upfront. Unfortunately, when it came to foresight and investment, most nobles were abysmal businessmen. "Hey, why is the yard empty?" The assistant pointed toward a distant plot of land. "Shouldn't they have the ore ready for us?" Petrov sighed softly. "We will go to the castle and seek an audience with His Royal Highness." The assistant hesitated. "Wait, Mr. Emissary, are you sure he will receive you?" Petrov did not know, but he kept that to himself. "Let's go," he said. "The stables are just ahead." The real trouble was the schism between the stronghold and Border Town. The king's decree that his children contend for the throne had effectively exiled the fourth prince here. Any other aristocrat or royal would naturally try to claim this land for themselves. Trading precious minerals for mere bread, Petrov feared the prince could only see the glint of gold royals. If he were in the prince's position, he would do the same, to helplessly watch his territory's wealth be traded away for simple sustenance. No one would stand for that. Besides, the goods didn't have to go to the stronghold. Most of the nobility forgot that the Kishui River didn't end at their gates. The prince could sell his ore at market price in Willow Town, Dragon Mountain, or even Red City. He could then lure their people away as new settlers. It was merely a longer trip down river. What could Longsong's stronghold do? Block the river? Cut off the prince and his entourage? That would be an open defiance of the royal family of Greycastle. Everyone knew the fourth prince was the least likely to inherit the throne, but he was still of the king's blood. To defy him was a fool's errand. The emissary and his assistant rode rented horses, moving slowly along the stone road that paralleled the river. The stables had only offered them old, tired animals with mottled, muddy coats that trembled even at a walking pace. For these two pathetic beasts, he'd still had to pay a deposit of 2 gold royals. "Sir, look," his aide shouted, pointing. "Is that a ship from Willow Town?" Petrov followed his gaze. Sure enough, a vessel was sailing slowly down river. A single green banner, emblazoned with a willow leaf, hung from its mast. The hull sat low in the water, a clear sign it was laden with cargo. He gave a curt nod, but inside, his stomach tightened. The prince was moving faster than he had anticipated. If he had already established contact with the towns downstream, the bargaining chips Petrov held were losing their value by the minute. He had planned to acquire the ore for 30% below market price, which would still guarantee a handsome profit. After all, once the stones were cut and polished into jewelry, their value would multiply several times over. But this was no monopoly. His family was one of 6 with a stake in the border town mining project, and without a majority consensus, no resolution could pass. The others were slow to react. They assumed the situation would remain unchanged, or perhaps they simply didn't deem the mining project worthy of their attention. The other 5 families were indifferent. Even his own father had flatly rejected his proposal. They were all wrong. The mine's output only seemed low because its trading options were limited. With open trade, profits would soar, and increased profits would inevitably lead to increased production. So much for their monopoly. That was clearly never going to happen now. The moment Petrov had seen that empty yard, he knew. The prince had no intention of trading his valuable minerals for their low-grade wheat. He was already finding other buyers. If the stronghold still wanted to maintain this line of business, a 30% discount was now the prince's best and only offer. Yes, the distance between Willow Town and Border Town was greater, which meant higher transportation costs, but Willow Town had other sources of ore. Their first offer would likely be half market price. As for Dragon Mountain and Red City, the price would be lower still. The 4th prince would surely agree to a monopoly with Longsong's stronghold, especially for the gem trade. But that was the problem, wasn't it? Even if he managed to sign a contract, would his father agree to it? Would the other 5 families, who believed they could simply starve Border Town into submission, ever accept such a deal? Should he sacrifice the interests of his own family to secure the contract? In their eyes, Border Town was still a territory controlled by Longsong's stronghold. What it produced was theirs for the taking. They rode through the town, heading toward the castle in the southeast corner. It wasn't Petrov's first time here, but this time the castle had a new lord. When the guards saw the emissary's sigil, one of them immediately ran inside to inform his lord. The summons came quickly. The 4th prince, Roland Wimbledon, would see him. As Petrov and his assistant were guided into the hall, they found the prince already at the head of the table, waiting for them. The prince gestured to a chair. "Mr. Emissary," he said, "please sit." Roland clapped his hands. A maid entered, carrying platters piled high with food, and the rich scent of roasted meat filled the hall. There was a whole grilled chicken, its skin glistening and golden, a leg of wild boar stewed with mushrooms, sending tendrils of steam into the air, freshly baked buttered bread, and a large, deep bowl of vegetable soup. Clearly, even in the borderlands, the prince had not sacrificed his personal comforts. Petrov did not hesitate. The journey by ship from Longsong's stronghold had taken 2 full days, and that was with a favorable wind. A larger cargo vessel would have taken 3, perhaps even 5. With no kitchen on board, he had subsisted on dried meat and hardtack. Now, faced with hot, fragrant dishes, he felt his mouth water. But years of aristocratic training took over. He maintained perfect etiquette, his movements precise and controlled. His Highness, by contrast, displayed far less refined table manners. It was his use of the knife and fork, or rather, the lack thereof. Petrov noted that after the initial carving, the 4th prince set aside his fork, and instead used a pair of slender wooden sticks. He manipulated them with surprising dexterity, picking up pieces of meat and vegetables. It looked far more convenient than a fork. At the end of the meal, Roland suddenly asked, "What do you think?" Petrov, lost in thought, was startled. "I'm sorry." Roland gestured with the sticks in his hand. "This, an iron fork, is a luxury for most, to say nothing of a silver one. When people eat with their hands, it's easy for dirt to find its way into their stomachs with the food. Sickness enters through the mouth, you see." The emissary was unsure how to respond. He didn't understand the phrase, "sickness enters through the mouth," but he grasped the general meaning. Roland was likely referring to the way contamination on food could make a person ill. It was true that people often fell sick and died for reasons no one could diagnose. The prince continued, "How many of these do you think you can get from a single oak tree? They're clean, and they're easy to make. I'm going to promote their use in the town." He took a sip of wine. "Of course, my people don't get much meat at the moment, but I intend to change that." Petrov felt a sense of relief. Now he knew how to answer. He offered the customary words of support and blessing, but inwardly he scoffed. Meat for all his people, a whimsical notion. Not even the capital, Greycastle, could manage such a feat. And here, in this desolate land. The banquet continued in a surprisingly harmonious atmosphere. The fourth prince made no mention of the ore trade, and Petrov felt it was not the right moment to broach the subject himself. It was only when the prince signaled for a maid to bring dessert that Petrov tentatively raised the matter. "Your Highness, according to our agreement, today is the day of delivery for the ore, but I saw that the loading yard at the docks was empty." Roland put down his wooden sticks and nodded. "Unfortunately, the Northern Slope mine collapsed some time ago. My people are attempting to resume production, but the rubble from the collapse has yet to be cleared. According to the current schedule, we should be able to begin mining again early next year." The mine collapsed. Petrov was stunned. Could it be a coincidence? He quickly realized the prince had no reason to lie. If Petrov were to visit the North Slope mine himself, he would see the truth immediately. Such a clumsy lie would only make the prince look foolish. Then, what of the ore mined before the collapse? "There wasn't much," Roland said, his tone practiced. "We mined the customary amount, but my people were unable to extract any more than that." He leaned forward slightly, his voice lowering. "Mr. Emissary, you surely remember what happened during the months of the demons 2 years ago, don't you?" Of course, Petrov remembered. The cold had lasted 4 brutal months. Here in Border Town, nearly half the population had starved to death, all because of the insatiable greed of the municipal governor, Reynold. There had been opposition among the aristocracy, of course. Some nobles had even called for Reynold to be punished, but in the end, nothing was done. He was, after all, married to the Duke's second daughter. Hearing the prince mention it now, a cold dread settled in Petrov's stomach. Roland sighed. "This time it will be worse. What little we mined before the collapse will barely purchase 2 months' worth of food. I will do what I can for my people, but I fear they won't survive the winter. The old trade agreement must be abolished." Petrov opened his mouth, but no words came. He had no counter-argument. He was no diplomat, and the prince's reasoning was airtight. He couldn't find a single flaw in it. All he could do was stall. "Your Highness, I must express my regret. This time will not be a repeat of that tragedy. I can arrange for a loan of 1 month's food. When your people resume production next year, they can slowly repay the debt." "I have already sold the ore to Willowtown," Roland said plainly. "We can use their money to repay you." "But—" Roland cut him off. "There is no but. They are willing to buy the ore with gold royals. They will also sell us wheat, cheese, bread, and honey at market price, which we can purchase with the royals from the sale. Mr. Emissary, even if you are willing to lend us food, would the other 5 families agree? From what I understand, even Duke Ryan struggles to find consensus with them." Petrov fell silent. The fourth prince was right. It wasn't just the other 5 families. He feared his own father wouldn't agree either. To maintain their monopoly, they would have to modify the entire trade agreement, but he lacked the authority to make that decision. He was called an emissary, but he was merely a spokesman. Perhaps the Duke never intended for anyone to strike a private deal with Border Town. Whether dealing with the former governor or the fourth prince, the Duke assigned a different person each season, and never a family head. But he had to try. He had come this far. Taking a breath, Petrov played his final card. 30%, he said, holding up 3 fingers. Longsong's stronghold will buy the ore and rough gems for 30% below market price. I believe, Your Highness, that you will find this offer more generous than Willow Town's. Roland considered this. Indeed, it is. But the question remains, can you guarantee the agreement of all 6 families? I will return to Longsong's stronghold tomorrow, Petrov promised. Once I have an agreement, I will come back with a new contract. But my people cannot wait that long, Roland countered. You know as well as I that reaching an agreement among the aristocracy can be time-consuming. Your Highness, cooperation with Longsong's stronghold is the wiser choice for you and your people. Willow Town is a great distance away, should your people need refuge during the months of the demons. As the words left his mouth, Petrov's throat went dry. The journey would be long and perilous. Good God, what am I doing? Petrov's heart hammered against his ribs. Did I just threaten a prince? A loud laugh suddenly filled the hall. To his surprise, Roland wasn't angry at all. He was laughing. Ha ha, Mr. Emissary, you seem to be mistaken. I never had any intention of retreating to Willow Town. What do you mean? The prince's smile was sharp. I don't intend to go to Longsong stronghold either. Roland watched the emissary's shifting expression with interest. I'm not going anywhere, he said. For a moment, Petrov wondered if his ears had deceived him. Fortunately, the prince did not let the awkward silence linger. This winter, I will remain in Border Town, he explained. It will become the new frontier of the kingdom. Don't be so surprised, my friend. This isn't some idle boast. I can show you the new masonry wall at the northern slope. A city wall. Yes, the prince confirmed. A stone wall, 12 feet high and 4 feet wide, connecting the northern slope to the Kishui River. With it, we can defeat the demonic beasts right here. Petrov's mind reeled. The last emissary had not mentioned a city wall, but of course he wouldn't have. At that time, the Lord of Border Town and most of its people were still in Longsong's stronghold. How could they have built a wall with such limited manpower? Did that mean the prince began construction the moment he arrived? That was only 3 months ago. How could they have built anything so massive in such a short time? And what had His Highness just said? 12 feet high and 4 feet wide, connecting the mountain to the river. Petrov tried to make the calculation in his head. A wall of that size would take 3 to 5 years to build, at least. And that was assuming one had enough stonemasons to cut and shape that much stone. This was a mining town. Its people were common laborers. Before he could process the news, Roland's next sentence struck him like a physical blow. As for the ore, the prince continued, starting next year, the price will be halved. However, we will no longer be selling exclusively to Longsong Stronghold. You have little need for so much raw ore. I suspect you would find more value in finished goods, spades, shovels, and the like. He paused, letting the words sink in. The rough gems will be sold at auction to the highest bidder. I would, of course, prefer to have them cut and polished here, but sadly, we currently lack the necessary craftsmen. And yet you claim you can build a massive wall in a few months. Petrov's composure nearly broke. A hot surge of anger rose in his chest. What does he mean? Longsong's stronghold doesn't require so much ore. The entire trade is worth a mere 1,000 gold royals a year. Even if production doubled, we could easily absorb it. Is he suggesting 2,000 is beyond our means? The arrogance! He forced the anger down, struggling to keep his expression neutral. I have noted everything you've said, Your Highness. I will return at once to negotiate with the 6 families, but the city wall you mentioned, I would like to see it for myself. Roland offered a slow, easy smile, of course, but there's no rush. Let us first enjoy these excellent pastries. It won't be too late to set out afterward, will it, Mr. Emissary? Winter had come, and with it the first rain. It fell without stopping, a steady grey sheet of water that had already lasted for 2 days. Roland stood at the window of his study. The wind drove the rain against the glass in slapping gusts, the water running down in ripples that distorted the world beyond. Through the warped, wavering pane, the small town became a twisted reflection of itself, its houses and streets seeming to melt into one another. The stone roads, lacking proper drainage, had become a web of flowing streams, gurgling and shining like 100 crystalline brooks. The distant mountains and forests were faint, grey shapes obscured by mist, a painted border at the edge of the world. In another life, such a scene would be a tourist attraction, but Roland yearned for a different kind of beauty, a jungle of concrete and steel. The rain had halted construction on the city wall, and the satisfaction he'd felt after dismissing the stronghold's emissary 2 days ago was slowly beginning to fade. A clear voice interrupted his thoughts. "You said that the air around us is made of many different kinds of gases. Is that true?" Roland turned. Anna was looking at him, her blue eyes wide with curiosity. Carter cleared his throat. "Ahem, Miss Anna, you should address His Highness properly." "There's no need for such formality." Roland waved a hand. "She's my student now." With the rain keeping everyone indoors, he had decided to hold a class for Carter and the 2 witches, a class in natural science. He'd been inspired by Carl, the stonemason. If a mason could open a school, why couldn't a mechanical engineer? Ignorance was the root of discrimination, and universal education was the most effective way to advance any civilization. He had also invited the assistant minister, Barav, but the man was swamped with official duties. For some reason, ever since the start of winter, Barav had been filled with an unusual enthusiasm, almost single-handedly overseeing the town's affairs. When Anna heard she could learn something new, her eyes had sparkled. With no wounded animals to tend to, Nonna was happy to attend as well. Carter, having nothing better to do, came along mainly to see what new absurdity the prince had concocted. Soon after the lesson began, however, the knight's eyes had glazed over. Nonna's gaze drifted, fixing blankly on the words natural science that Roland had written on a board. Only Anna, though she struggled to understand everything, hung on his every word. Roland had paused his lecture to let them digest what they'd heard. He smiled at Anna's question and nodded. "Of course it's true, even though we can't see it." "Your Highness, I don't understand." Carter chimed in. "If air is invisible, how can you possibly know it's made of different things?" "I can prove it to you." Roland knew that mere theory, no matter how simple, would only confuse them. A simple demonstration was the best way to spark their interest. He had prepared the materials in advance: a candle, a glass, a basin, and a bowl of lime water. The local glass was a pale, smoky brown, a far cry from the perfect transparency he was used to, but it would suffice. The experiment didn't require a clear view of the process. Roland had already performed the test once before, just to be certain. The results had confirmed that even in a world with magic, the fundamental laws of nature were the same as on Earth. He asked Anna to light the candle with her flame, then placed it in the basin. "When something burns," he explained, "it consumes a certain gas in the air. This gas is the same one we need to breathe. Without it, we would be extinguished, just like this candle. Watch." He carefully placed the glass over the burning candle. The flame flickered twice, then quickly went out. "It used up the air, Your Highness," the chief knight said, his tone unimpressed. "That's hardly surprising. Of course we die without air. It's no different from drowning." Nonna nodded in agreement. "So," Roland asked, "do you think the glass is empty?" He poured the lime water into the basin. The clear liquid pooled around the base of the glass before rising inside, stopping when it was about half full. It was a classic experiment, one used by elementary school teachers to spark an interest in natural science. Roland still remembered the shock he'd felt when his own teacher had performed the demonstration. From that day forward, he had set upon a path of science and engineering from which he'd never strayed. He gently lifted one edge of the glass. A moment later, a stream of tiny bubbles rose through the lime water inside. The clear liquid began to turn cloudy as a swirl of white bloomed and spread through the water like a cloud in a bottle. If the glass were empty, Roland explained, we wouldn't have seen the air bubbles or the change in the lime water. This proves that the air contains at least two different gases. You see, burning the candle consumed only one. Of them, the other is incapable of sustaining a flame. It's colorless and odorless, just like the first, but its properties are entirely different. Carter thought for a long moment, his brow furrowed. That seems to be the case, but what is the use of knowing this? Anna spoke suddenly, her voice quick and clear. If you could isolate the first gas, you could make a flame burn longer, and with the other gas, you could extinguish flames more quickly. A genius, Roland thought, praising her silently. It was a brilliant insight. There was a minor flaw in her logic, but she had grasped the different properties of the gases and immediately conceived of a practical application. She had never received a modern education, yet she could make that leap, which spoke to her extraordinary reasoning. She was far sharper, at least, than his chief knight. Exactly, Roland said, guiding them patiently. One could say that when humans learned to use fire, they separated themselves from the animals. Obtaining fire was an accident, a lightning strike, a spark from two stones. But if no one had noticed it, if no one had tried to use it, we would still be no different from the beasts. He looked at each of them in turn. This experiment was meant to show you that curiosity and reason are the engines of human progress. Nature is full of such hidden forces, waiting for us to discover and harness them. Carter still looked doubtful. Nana hovered in a state between sleep and wakefulness, her unfocused eyes fixed on Roland. Only Anna had bowed her head, as if in deep thought. Roland sighed internally. Teaching concepts so far beyond their current understanding wouldn't bring enlightenment, only confusion. Their own knowledge limited their ability to grasp the power of nature unless it was demonstrated right before their eyes. Only then would they comprehend the incredible forces hidden within the world. Just then a sharp rattling came from the mantelpiece. The kettle hanging over the fire began to jump as steam pinged against its lid. Ah, the water's boiling, Carter said. He walked over and used a fire poker to lift the kettle from its hook. The sound stopped. He took a piece of cloth, wrapped it around the hot handle, and filled their cups with steaming water. Roland reached out, his hand wrapping around the warm ceramic of his cup, feeling the heat seep into his skin. From the very first day humans had used fire, they had understood the principle of boiling water. For hundreds of thousands of years, people had witnessed it, had used it. But no one had ever considered that the gently rising vapor contained a power capable of changing the world. In a few hundred years, that simple, rising steam would become the engine of human development, changing the course of history in a remarkably short time. The principle was simple. The problem wasn't a lack of technology, but a lack of imagination. For most people, the only choice was to farm. But Roland was different. This world, he thought, also had witches. To use magic merely for battle was the way of barbarians. Magic could be used to create, to replace key technologies and accelerate human development. That was the correct way to use it. The conversation lasted until sunset. After dinner, Roland retired to his bedroom. There was no nightlife to speak of in this age. People simply went to bed early. He had briefly considered using his princely authority to summon a maid for some entertainment, but in the end was too embarrassed to voice the request. He had just lit the candle in his room, the small flame pushing back the shadows, when a sound came from behind him. A single soft clap of applause, followed by a woman's voice. A spectacular lecture. I did not expect that His Royal Highness, the fourth Prince, was a learned man. The voice was unfamiliar. A cold sweat broke out across Roland's skin. How had a stranger gotten into his room? If not an assassin, what else could she be? He bolted for the door, but before his hand could touch the knob, a cold wind whistled past his ear. A silver dagger embedded itself deep in the wood, its handle quivering a finger's width from his cheek. The woman's voice came again, calm and steady. "Please, don't be impulsive, Your Highness. I mean you no harm. I only came to talk." "This is how you want to talk." Roland swallowed hard, his throat dry. Under the threat of another dagger, he had no choice but to comply. He turned, slowly and deliberately. In the dim, flickering candlelight, he saw her. She was sitting on his bed, her body hidden beneath a dark robe, her face obscured by a deep hood. Her shadow, cast by the single candle, loomed large and ominous on the wall behind her, occupying more than half the space. "Who are you?" Roland asked. "I have no name," she said, "but my sisters call me Nightingale." She stood, straightened her robe, and then, unexpectedly, knelt on one knee in a standard noble bow. "First, I am here to express my gratitude to you, Roland Wimbledon, Your Highness." Gratitude. Roland's eyes caught a glint on her gown. The candlelight reflected off threads that formed a unique pattern, 3 parallel triangles with an eye in the center. He had seen it before. "That pattern, on the coin," he breathed, "the Eye of the Holy Mountain. It's the insignia of the Witch Cooperation Association." Barov's words came rushing back to him. "You're a witch." She let out a light, musical laugh. "Your Highness is quite knowledgeable." Hearing her confirm her identity, Roland felt a wave of relief wash over him. She wasn't an assassin sent by his siblings. "Why has a witch come to this remote town, and wherever you heard your news, you're too late. If I'd truly wanted her hanged, she would be long dead." "I know," Nightingale said, sitting back down on his bed. "And if you had, I wouldn't be talking with you now. The Witch Cooperation Association does not intervene in worldly affairs, particularly those of kings. Frankly, it would not be difficult for a witch to kill a prince. I wish to honor the association's directive. However, if you leave a poor second impression, I can still kill you." It was a clear threat. Roland attempted to ease the tension. "The witch. She is alive and well." "I know," the woman nodded. "And there is another little girl besides her. I arrived a week ago. I have remained unseen, but I have observed everything you've done. I don't understand why you lack the usual malice toward witches, but whatever your reasons, on behalf of the Witch Cooperation Association, I thank you." A week ago, Roland rubbed his forehead. She's seen everything. The thought was chilling. She had been following him, and neither he nor his guards had been aware of her. "Enough. You didn't come here simply to say thank you, did you?" "Are you already tired of me?" Nightingale asked. She reached up and pulled back her hood. "See, I'm not so awful. I won't frighten you, Your Highness." She was far more than not awful. She was stunning. As the hood fell away, a cascade of golden hair tumbled down like a waterfall, catching the candlelight in a dizzying display. She had a strong, aquiline nose and sparkling eyes. Unlike the youthful features of Anna and Nonna, hers held a mature, captivating charm. Even in the dim light, the perfect symmetry of her face was undeniable. Slowly, Roland walked to the bed and sat beside her. It wasn't attraction. That would be far too dangerous, but a simple, gut feeling that she meant him no real harm. "Now," he said, "you can speak freely." A note of happiness entered Nightingale's voice. "Just as I thought. You're not afraid of me. I've seen how others react. They hate us because they fear us. I can see it in their eyes, but in you." She couldn't stop herself. She reached out and gently stroked his cheek. "Roland, I see only curiosity." Roland coughed, embarrassed, and pulled his head from her touch. The sudden shift in atmosphere was jarring. A moment ago, she was an assassin. How could her demeanor change so completely? Fortunately, she quickly restrained herself. I came to tell you that I'm taking Anna and Nonna with me. No, the word escaped him. Worried that his blunt refusal might anger her, he quickly added, they have a very good life here. No one can harm them. Besides, where would you take them? There is no place safer than this. I will take them to the Witch Cooperation Association. It is their home, after all, Nightingale said. Despite his denial, she did not become angry. Her tone remained calm. The other members of the association are their family. There, they will face no discrimination, no persecution. They will no longer have to live in hiding. But the association has no fixed home, does it? A month ago, my guards found your abandoned camp in the forest. They found footprints leading north, but to the north there is nothing but endless mountains. You're right, she said. The Witch Cooperation Association is hidden somewhere in those mountains, and for us witches, it is the safest place in the world. His tone grew urgent. Imagine it, living like savages in the mountains during winter. Can you guarantee clean water, enough food, a warm shelter? He leaned forward, his voice low. The months of the demons are coming. The entire Northwest will become a hunting ground. In the end, what? Roland paused, a memory surfacing. Something Barov had said. What was it? Only at the Holy Mountain can a witch find true peace. The purpose of the Witch Cooperation Association is to find the Holy Mountain together. Roland pushed the thought away. To hell with that. He looked directly at Nightingale. You're going into the impassable mountain range to find the Holy Mountain, aren't you? Nightingale smiled, though her eyes betrayed nothing. I'm afraid I can't answer that. But her silence was answer enough. He flatly rejected the idea. If that's your plan, I will never agree, he said, shaking his head. It's only 2 months until the land is swarming with demonic beasts. You might avoid humans in the mountains, but you can't hide from them. I have a better proposal, instead of chasing this myth. You should all come to Border Town, survive the winter here, in safety. When it ends, you can resume your search. This time it was Nightingale's turn to be stunned. She stared at him. The Witch Cooperation Association should move here. A slow smile touched her lips. You truly are an interesting man. She considered it for a moment, her head tilted, but in the end she shook her head. Your Highness, she said softly, even if you are not afraid of us, you can't guarantee the same for your people. I'm afraid that once we are revealed, the Church's minions will soon come knocking on your door. If the witches help us through the winter, Roland thought, my people will see they are not evil. But just as he was about to speak, Nightingale stopped him. Besides, she said, there is another reason I must take the girls. Anna will soon reach adulthood. Roland repeated the word, confused. Adulthood. Yes, Nightingale said, her expression calm as she read the question in his eyes. Adulthood is the first great hurdle all witches must cross. The longer they wait, the more difficult the passage. Most awaken their powers at a younger age than Anna did. She paused, her gaze steady. Your Highness, do you know why they call us the devils incarnate?